I grew up in the Yukon. Forests, snow, isolation, these have always been part of my life. I work as a hauler between small towns and communities that live in near isolation for months at a time. I'm used to the silence, the extreme cold, and the pitch-black winter roads. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw one early morning in October, as I headed toward Old Crow. It's a long, difficult stretch of road with few signs. I was alone, with the snow starting to fall lightly, and a strange fog forming on the horizon. That's when I saw the light. It was a small, steady white light. On top of a hill, far from the road. At first I thought it was a communications tower or a shelter. But it didn't blink or waver. It stayed there, lit steadily, like a stationary flashlight. And the strangest thing, it didn't seem to be attached to anything. No building, no pole. Just the light, suspended, as if it had been left there. I made a mental note of the spot and kept driving, but for some reason, that light held me. As if it had been placed there on purpose, like a sign. Something inside me told me I needed to see it up close. After about 40 minutes, I came to a dirt road intersection that pointed toward the hill. I could see the light from there, still high up, still in the distance. I decided to turn off the route and head toward it. The trail was rough, full of rocks, but my truck could handle it. And I was determined. I drove for about 15 kilometers, always with the light visible. But no matter how far I went, it never got any bigger. It never seemed any closer. It was as if I was always the same distance away, even when the GPS said I was almost at the bottom of the hill. This started to make me uneasy. I stopped at a point where the truck couldn't go any further. I grabbed a flashlight and continued on foot, the snow now getting heavier. I walked for over an hour, climbing slowly, slipping on icy rocks. And the light? Always at the top. Always the same. Until suddenly, without warning, it went out. I stood there, panting, trying to understand. I looked around, waiting for it to come back on. And when I turned around, it was back on. But not in front. It was behind me. On the way I had come. Frozen with fear, I could only stare at the light below, now shining where my truck should have been. It was the same light. Exactly the same. Same intensity, same height. But it didn't make sense. I had walked up the hill, and now the light was lower, as if it had tricked me, led me away from it on purpose. I started back down, hurriedly, sliding more than walking. I just wanted to get to the truck. The forest around me seemed thicker, and the feeling of being watched grew with every step. There was no sound. No animals, no wind. Just the sound of my hurried footsteps and the echo of my own fear. I reached the spot where I had left the truck, but it was gone. The ground showed the tire tracks, the tracks in the fresh snow, as if it had simply driven off on its own. But no one had touched it. I had the key. And the light? It was still steady, now a little further away, as if it were slowly moving away. I started running in that direction, without thinking, just guided by the light. The snow was falling harder, and my flashlight was starting to fail. Except I couldn't stop. It was as if that light had something of mine. As if it knew I was going to follow it, no matter what. I ran until I could no longer feel my fingers. When I stumbled and fell to my knees, the light went out again. A dry, total blackout. It was pitch black. I lay there on the ground, trying to figure out where I was. And then I heard the sound. Very faint, but clear. A slap on the ice, then another, and heavy, drawn-out breathing. It was coming from close by. But I couldn't see anything. I turned on the flashlight again, which blinked about 3 times before turning on completely, and there was the light. Very close. No longer high up, but on the ground, about 20 meters away from me, still. It was smaller now. As if it had changed shape. As if it were looking at me. It was at that moment that I realized, she was guiding me. Not to the truck, nor to the road. To somewhere in the middle of that frozen forest. There was no trail, no destination. Just the cold, the darkness, and that light that appeared and disappeared as I walked. I started following, as if hypnotized. My body ached, my head throbbed, but I walked. Every time I hesitated, the light would go out. And then reappear in another spot, calling me. When I realized it, I was surrounded by dense trees, and the GPS signal had long since died. It was just me, the snow, and that damn light that seemed to never end. Suddenly, the light stopped. Steady. Shining between 2 thick trees. I approached slowly, feeling the cold seeping through the seams of my jacket. And there, on the ground, I saw something that chilled me to the core, a flashlight just like mine. Same brand, same model. Beside it, frozen footprints on the ground, identical to my boots. But older. I spent a while staring at it, unable to move. It was as if I were repeating someone else's steps, or my own, from another time. The idea of being trapped in a cycle invaded me in a way that made me breathless. And before I could think about going back, the light went out once more. I stood still, waiting for her to reappear, as she always did. But this time, she didn't. The silence was total. The sky was beginning to lighten on the horizon, and then I understood, she only existed in the darkness. I walked back the way I could, without knowing exactly where I was going. I guided myself by the marks I had left in the snow. Hours later, I was found by a search party that had left when they noticed I was late. They found the truck more than 20 kilometers from the original road, out of fuel, with the key still in the ignition. And the ground flashlight? It was gone. I told him everything I could remember. No one laughed. One of the older men on the rescue team simply said, "You saw the light on the hillside." I remained silent. And he added, "It always appears to someone. But never in the same place. Never in the same way." I asked him what it was. He didn't answer. He just handed me a blanket and said, "I'm glad it gave you back." Since then, I never drive around there at night again. And when I see a light on top of a mountain, even if it's far away, even if it looks like a tower or a shelter, I look the other way. Because now I know. That light isn't there to help. It pulls you in. And when you realize it, you don't know where you came from anymore. Or if it's the first time you're following. Because there's a part of me that still doubts if I've really made it back. And sometimes, in my dreams, I see the hill in the distance, with a small white light on, steady. Waiting for me. Missouri has always had a few places that have left me scratching my head. Roads that disappear from your GPS, towns that look empty even with the lights on. But what happened to me at an old rest stop near Rolla was different. It was the kind of thing that seems small until you start adding up the details. I was heading east after a quick delivery in Springfield and stopped at an old truck stop I'd never seen before. It looked like something out of the 70s, a faded neon sign, a single gas pump, and a small convenience store with only one door open. The others were either locked or boarded up. It was about 3 in the morning. The place was empty, with no other trucks around. I thought it was strange, but I went down anyway. I entered through the only open door and found myself face to face with a place that was almost frozen in time. Dusty shelves, a coffee maker that made more noise than coffee, and a man sitting behind the counter, head down, not saying anything. I said, "Good evening," but he just looked up and nodded, as if he recognized me. I got a soda, went to the cashier, left the money and left. It was about 5 minutes. But when I got back to the cabin, things were already different. The first thing I noticed was the radio. I had tuned it to a regular country station, and now it was in Spanish. A slow voiceover, like an old AM radio. I tried to change it, but the button wouldn't respond. I stared at it for a few seconds, until I noticed the name on my badge. It wasn't mine. I mean, the picture was mine, but the name was different. Something like Antonio Herrera. The badge was stuck to my jacket, the same jacket I was wearing before. It was like it had been switched without me noticing. I stood there, trying to rationalize. I thought maybe I had picked up a similar jacket. But the keys in my pocket, my pack of cigarettes, everything was there. Only the name was different. I went back to the store to try to figure it out, but the door wouldn't open anymore. I tried to force it, knock on it, but nothing. The same door I'd come in through seemed sealed now, as if it had never been used. And the others were locked. The sign was still on up there, the interior light was off. The truck was the same, the road was the same. But everything seemed a little wrong. Like when you dream about a place you know, but the details are all wrong. And the radio kept playing, with that voice in Spanish saying something I didn't understand, but it kept repeating the same word, despierta. I decided to keep going, even though my head was spinning. The more I drove, the more things seemed distorted. The signs on the road all had names I didn't recognize. The cities disappeared from the GPS, as if I were on a parallel version of the route I knew by heart. I looked at my phone, and the language had changed too. Everything was in Spanish. I understood a few words, but most of them didn't make sense. And the clock on the dashboard showed a completely different time, 3 hours ahead. As if I had been inside that store longer than I thought. But there was no way. Not for that long. Or had I? Later, I stopped at a gas station to try to talk to someone. A friendly attendant came up to me, and when I asked where we were, he said the name of a city I had never heard of. I asked him to repeat it, and he looked at me strangely, as if I had asked something obvious. The sign on his uniform was in Spanish too. When I tried to take out my credit card to fill up the tank, he gave me a strange look. The machine refused the card, as if it didn't recognize my bank. A quick message appeared on the screen, like a system error, but in red letters, "No pertenece." I walked back to the truck, feeling increasingly out of place. I rummaged through my things, trying to find any document with my real name on it. Nothing. Even my driver's license had the name Antonio Herrera on it. The photo, the signature, everything was the same, except for the name. The only thing intact was an old gas station receipt, in English, dated the day before. I didn't know if I was dreaming, if I had freaked out, or if I had really crossed some invisible line at that truck stop. All I knew was that I had to get out of there. I headed toward the next exit on the highway, hoping to find something familiar. But everything seemed emptier than before. I drove for over an hour until I saw another truck driver stopped. I waved, got out, and asked if I could talk. He looked at me for a while, and the first thing he said was, "You also came in through the only door, right?" My stomach turned. I asked what he meant by that. And all he said was, "You don't go back through the same place." We were silent. Then he pointed to his badge, changed name. Another identity. Another life. And he said that, with time, we forget who we were. That the only way out is to keep driving. And that, if one day the store opens again, never go back in again. Because next time, maybe not even the face will be the same. Ever since that night, I've kept driving. The roads change, the names on the signs change, but the truck stop never appears again. What remains is the constant feeling that I'm driving in a world that isn't exactly my own. It's all similar, familiar enough to keep me from going crazy. But the details are wrong. People who say they know me but call me by a different name. Places that should be full but are empty. As if I've slipped into a slightly warped version of reality. I've tried to go home. But my home doesn't exist here. Nor does my town. Nor my parents. The only thing that keeps me company is the radio. It still speaks in Spanish. And that voice, sometimes soft, sometimes urgent, always repeats the same word, despierta. And it haunts me. Because what if I'm still asleep? What if that truck stop is some kind of gateway to another kind of dream? A dream that never ends? I've tried turning off the radio, smashing the dashboard. But it always comes back on. Always on. Always the same transmission. I've thought about abandoning the truck and just walking. But I'm afraid that outside of it, things will get worse. Or that I'll just disappear. I once stopped at a remote outpost, and in the bathroom there was a cracked mirror. When I looked, I swear for a second, I saw someone else in the reflection. Not just different, but older. Deeper set eyes. As if time was moving differently here. The person looked back at me, but didn't look back. And then he blinked. Ever since that day, I've covered all the mirrors with tape. And I avoid sleeping too much. Because every nap takes me further away from remembering who I was. Sometimes I wake up and it takes me seconds to remember my own name. Or the name that's left. Now, I just keep going. With the feeling that I'm stuck in a script that I didn't write. And whenever I see an old truck stop on the side of the road, with closed doors and one open, I pass right by. I don't even look. Because I know that if I stop again, there will be no going back. And, deep down, I think there are others out there. People who got in, like me. People who today live under a borrowed name, in a life that is not theirs, hoping that one day, the radio will stop repeating. Despierta. A few years ago I worked delivering hospital equipment in the north of Scotland. It was a lonely job, a lot of time on the road, crossing beautiful landscapes that sometimes felt too empty. One of the most isolated routes I took was one that cut through part of the Highlands, passing through tiny villages and stretches with no signs at all. It was on one of these stretches that I would later hear some people call the Screaming Road. But that night, it was just another late run, in a rush to deliver before dawn. And with the sky clear and the road clear, I started to speed up. I hit 70 miles per hour without thinking much about it. The van was stable, everything was normal, until I started to notice a strange sound coming from below. At first I thought it was the engine or something loose in the bucket. But the noise was irregular, like a muffled voice. I couldn't quite make it out. Except that as I kept up the speed, the sound grew louder. A scream. Several screams. Like they were trapped under the asphalt. I stood there for a moment, not sure if I was really hearing it or if it was just in my head. But it was real. It was like the entire road was screaming, muffled by its own weight. I slowed down, my heart racing, and that's when the sound changed. It wasn't just screams anymore. It was voices. Calling for help. Phrases like, "Get me out of here," and "Someone's down here," started to emerge, like whispers carried by the engine. The sound wasn't coming from the speakers. Or the radio. It was as if it was being transmitted through the vibrations of the road, straight into the floor of the van. I tried to stop, to get out, but as soon as I dropped below 40 miles per hour, everything stopped. Total silence. I got out, looked around, and saw nothing but deserted road and dark fields on either side. But something there seemed to be watching. I got back in the van and tried to drive slowly, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the speed again, and the screams came back. At exactly the same point, 70 miles per hour. It was like a trigger. I tested it twice more. Always the same. Above 70, the asphalt screamed. Below, it whispered calls for help. And still, silence. It didn't make sense. It was as if there were people trapped down there. As if the ground itself was alive, or holding something. And at that point, the road stretched on for more than 20 kilometers without curves. Straight, empty, and now, deafening. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was some kind of strange vibration from the engine due to the type of asphalt, I don't know. But then I remembered that, before I took this route, a colleague from the company told me, half laughing, half serious, that this road kept the sounds of those who disappeared there. At the time I thought it was a joke from a bored truck driver, but now it made a sense that chilled me to the core. Even more so when I began to notice something in the screams. They seemed to come from different voices. Men, women, children. It wasn't a generic sound. It was specific. Painful. Real. As if there was an echo of despair embedded in the asphalt. In a moment of impulse, I pulled over to the side of the road, turned off the engine, and put my ear to the ground. It was one of the worst decisions I've ever made. The sound was low but constant. It was as if I had put my ear to a coffin and there were people inside. Moans, scratches, a hoarse voice murmuring words that I couldn't understand. I jumped up, feeling my body cold, with the hairs on my arms standing on end. I stood there, not knowing whether to go back to the van or run away. But where should I run? I was in the middle of nowhere. Just me, the road, and the sounds coming from beneath it. I decided to keep going, but at a slower pace. The asphalt seemed to pulse. As if it was breathing faintly, just below the surface. And the more I drove, the more the voices seemed to acknowledge my presence. At one point, I clearly heard someone saying, "I see you." I almost lost control of the van. I almost threw everything into the ravine. But I managed to keep going. I reached the end of the stretch and the sounds disappeared as if they had been cut by a razor. A heavy silence took over. It seemed like the road had let me go. But with something in return. The next morning I went to a pub in Inverness and mentioned it to one of the guys behind the bar, just to see if anyone else had heard of it. The old man who was cleaning glasses stopped dead in his tracks and said, "The road does scream. But not to everyone." I asked him what he knew, and all he said was, "They put new asphalt over an old village. They say they didn't remove the bodies." And after that, he didn't say anything else. He just stared at me, as if he knew I was part of it now. I made my way back a few days later, even though I didn't need to. Part of me wanted to confirm that this was real. That I hadn't lost my mind. And there it was, exactly the same. The same long straight, the same solitude, the same heavy silence before 70 miles per hour. When I hit speed, the screams came back. But this time, they were different. They had a rhythm. A chorus of sorts. As if the desperation had been replaced by something more coordinated. It made me think that maybe this wasn't just agony. Maybe it was a call. A warning. Or worse, a summons. I slowed down. And just like before, the screams turned into voices. But now they were saying new things. One of them said my name. In a low, clear voice. Thomas. It was the first time I felt like it recognized me. That it knew who I was. And the scariest thing was that the next day I received an anonymous email with an audio recording. It was a recording of the screams. The same ones I had heard on that road. I hadn't told anyone about it. No one knew. There was no way anyone could have known. But the recording was there. With a simple title, "We're Still Here." Today, I avoid that stretch. I change my route, I take detours, I use more fuel. It doesn't matter. I never want to hear that again. But sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night, the radio picks up a noise that shouldn't be there. A brief hiss, and in the middle of it, a muffled scream. As if it were trying to cross again. I've thought about reporting it, but report what? A road that screams? No one would believe it. Only those who have been there and heard it, know. And the worst part is that I still hear my own voice in my dreams, repeating what I last heard on that asphalt. Get me out of here. There's a stretch of I-90 in the middle of South Dakota that everyone avoids driving in the middle of the night. It's a flat place with no curves, and a horizon so straight it looks like a painting, but it's there, between the nothingness and the biting wind, that something happens that I've never been able to explain. I used to think it was a trucker's superstition, a story to pass the time. Then, one freezing March night, with the road completely deserted and the clock showing 3:30 in the morning, everything changed. My mind was tired but alert. And that's when the crows started tapping on the windshield. The first one was dry, straight on the windshield. I thought it was some nocturnal animal. But seconds later, 2 more came. Then 4. In less than a minute, I had 8 or 9 crows circling the cabin, banging on the windows, scratching the hood. I tried using the high beams, honking the horn, accelerating. Nothing worked. It was as if they knew where I was. As if they were waiting. The sound of their wings, their beaks against the windshield, their bodies falling on the hood was unbearable. One of them got stuck, with its wing open, trapped between the wiper and the windshield. And that was when I saw what I shouldn't have. I stopped the truck, got out trembling, and with a piece of cloth I removed the body. It was a common crow, black, with a broken wing. But in its beak, there was a human eye. Not a piece, not an illusion. A whole eye, still wet, looking at me. I dropped the cloth and took a few steps back, feeling my stomach turn. The crow's body trembled slightly, as if it were still alive. But the others had already disappeared. No other crows in the sky, no sound. Only the wind. I picked up the cloth again, threw everything in a bag and put it in the back of the cab. I had to get out of there. I got back on the road, accelerating faster than I should have, and tried to forget what I had seen. But at 3:33 sharp, the radio turned on by itself. A strange interference, a hissing sound, as if someone was trying to tune into a station that didn't exist. And in the middle of the noise, I heard a whispered phrase, slow and clear, "It's not the first one." I almost lost control of the truck. I stopped at the first gas station I found, an hour later, and stayed there until the sun came up. I didn't have the courage to look at the bag in the cargo compartment. But I swear it was moving, as if something inside was still trying to get out. When daylight came, I went to the back of the cabin. The bag was still there, but deflated. Weightless, with nothing inside. I opened it carefully, and the cloth was clean. No eyes, no body. Just the smell. A strong, metallic smell, like dried blood mixed with something rotten. It confused me more than relieved me. I got back on the road, trying not to think, but in each city I passed, I looked for news of disappearances, accidents, anything that could explain it. Nothing. No reports, no alerts. It was as if whatever had happened was outside the normal world. As if it had happened only to me. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to trucker forums. I saw vague mentions of birds in the glass on I-90. Always on the same stretch. Always between 3:30 and 3:40 in the morning. One said he saw a hand caught in a crow's wing. Another said he heard someone calling his name when the crash happened. But no one would give any details. Everyone avoided going into detail. As if talking too much would make it come back. As if it gave you power. I tried to forget. I tried to convince the company to change my route. But 2 weeks later, they sent me the same way. Same load, same time. I planned to leave sooner or later, to avoid that stretch of time. But fate seemed to have other ideas. Problems on the road, a flat tire, a delay in loading. Before I knew it, I was back on that exact stretch, at 3:29. The radio was off, the headlights were on high, and my heart was pounding. I counted the seconds on the digital clock on the dashboard. 3:30, nothing. 3:31, silence. 3:32, the first sound of wings. And at 3:33, they came. Again. Straight at the windshield, hard, as if they were trying to get in. But this time, I didn't stop. I kept accelerating, swerving as best I could, until I got past the stretch. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw the bodies on the asphalt. Some were getting up. Others were staying. But all of them, in the reflection, seemed to be looking at me. As if they knew. As if they were waiting for me to come back. I didn't. I only stopped in Sioux Falls, where I left the truck and went straight to a hospital. I said I felt sick. That I couldn't go on. They believed me. They sent me home. But since then, every day at 3:33, I wake up to the sound of wings beating against my window. Even at home. Even with everything closed. As if they had found a new way to me. I've tried changing rooms, sleeping with earplugs in my ears, leaving the radio on, nothing works. At 3:33, the sound always comes back. Wings against the glass. A dry, insistent tap. And when I muster up the courage to look, there's never anything there. But the glass is always dirty. As if something had pressed hard against it. Sometimes, beak marks. Other times, small, parallel scratches. And one night, I found a black feather on top of my bed. I went to the bathroom mirror and saw that there was a small cut on my shoulder. Straight. Thin. As if a beak had pinched me. But I never heard the window open. I went back to therapy and started taking sleeping pills, but the doctor says it's psychological. That it must have been an unresolved trauma. But I know it's not just that. There's something about that stretch of I-90 that shouldn't be there. Something that manifests itself in the crows. As if they were carriers of something older, darker. Something that sticks with us. Because no matter where I go, they always know. They always find me. And the worst part, they're getting bolder. Now, sometimes, the radio turns on by itself. Even at home. And it whispers that phrase I heard in the truck, it's not the first. I've thought about going back there. Stopping in the same place. Trying to understand, facing it. But something tells me that if I do that, I won't go back. That this thing is waiting for that. To pull me in once and for all. I don't know what happened to the others who saw what I saw. But I think that one by one they're disappearing. They're slowly fading away, as if they never existed. And those who stay are just a story on a truck driver's forum, told halfway. A vague warning that no one takes seriously. Until it's too late. So if you're ever cruising down I-90 in the middle of the night, and the clock says 3:33, don't look out the windshield. Don't stop. Don't listen. Because if they recognize you, they'll follow you. And if one of them gets stuck in the glass, don't touch it. Just keep driving. Because what comes next, there's no going back. I've always driven alone on long routes in the Australian outback. Most of the roads are deserted, hot, and endless, but after a while, you get used to it. You know you'll spend hours without seeing a soul, just dust and the sun beating down. I was on one of these trips, cutting through the stretch between Coober PD and Alice Springs, when I noticed something strange in the passenger side mirror. It was subtle at first. The image reflected seemed off. The sky in the reflection was too orange, as if it were dawn, but in the real world the sky was clear, blue, without a single cloud. I thought it was dirt, some crazy reflection from the heat. Until I noticed the signs. All the signs in the mirror were upside down. As if they were on the wrong side of the road, written backwards. And even weirder, some of them didn't even really exist there. In the mirror, there were signs that didn't match what I saw with my own eyes. One of them said, "Come back now." Another simply said, "It's not too late." I looked outside several times, trying to confirm, but the real world was normal. It was just the mirror that showed something different. That's when I stopped the truck in a shady spot, got out and went to the mirror to clean it. And then I saw something I shouldn't have. In the reflection, a truck was coming just like mine. Same model, same color, even the worn stickers on the back. But it was coming the wrong way. Directly toward me, but only in the mirror. I looked at the real horizon and there was nothing coming. No car, no truck. Just empty road. But in the mirror, the truck was moving steadily, as if it knew I was there. I braked. My stomach felt cold, that feeling that something was out of place and you couldn't fix it. The strangest thing? The driver. In the reflection, I could see someone inside. But he wasn't looking at me. He was imitating me. Every movement I made was repeated with a second's delay. When I touched the edge of the mirror, the reflection did the same. When I stepped back, so did it. It was as if it were my reflection, but on the other side. From another place. I ran back to the cabin, started the engine and tried to ignore it. I continued on my way, looking only at the driver's side mirror. But at one point or another, I couldn't help myself and took a quick peek to the side. The truck was still there. At the same distance. At the same pace. Following me. Only in the mirror. I drove for more than 2 hours with my heart racing, avoiding looking to the right. But I couldn't ignore it for long. At every turn, at every change in terrain, the light in the reflection remained the same, that orange sky, as if the sun never left that spot, as if it were always late afternoon. And the truck remained there. Never closer, never further away. Sometimes, the reflection would blink for a second. It would disappear. And then come back. As if it had trouble staying still. I tried to record it with my cell phone, to film the mirror, but the camera didn't capture anything unusual. It only showed the normal road. It was as if the mirror only worked for the eyes. I stopped at a small gas station, with no cell phone signal, in the middle of nowhere, and told the attendant, trying to sound casual. I said that my mirror had a strange reflection. He stared at me for a few seconds and asked, "Passenger side?" I nodded. He just said, "You should cover it with a cloth. You shouldn't stare at it for too long." And he went back to stacking cans as if nothing had happened. I stood there, not knowing what to do. When I got back to the truck, I covered the mirror with tape and a piece of tarp. I drove like that until nightfall. But at night, it was no use. The orange light came from inside the cabin. It was as if the reflection had passed through. The shadow of the other truck began to appear in the windows, even though there was nothing outside. And more than once, I saw my own face in the side window, but it didn't move with me. It just stood there, staring, with a slight smile, as if it knew something I didn't. It felt like I had been split apart. That a part of me had stayed on the other side. Or worse, that the part on the other side was trying to step into my place. And every time I blinked, it took another second for me to be sure who I was. That's when I made the decision to stop everything. I pulled off the road, pulled over at the first motel I found, and slept for almost 12 hours straight, exhausted. The next day, the mirror was back to normal. Blue skies, clear roads. But I didn't feel the same. My reflection in the bathroom of my room looked duller, older. And when I turned on the truck's radio, it was set to a station I never listened to. It was playing a strange, slow song in a language I didn't recognize. The screen showed the name of the track, Through the Mirror. Since then, I've been traveling, but with the right-hand mirror always covered. And the feeling that, at some point, it will call to me again. A few weeks later, I met a trucker in Adelaide who had a mirror covered with the same mirror as mine. We joked about it and he immediately became serious. I asked him if he had ever seen the Orange Road. He just nodded, looking down. He said he had seen his own truck coming the other way, and that since then he had been unable to recognize himself in his reflection. Sometimes my face in the mirror flashes first. That gave me a chill. It was exactly what I had been feeling. As if the mirrors were showing a version of me that was more at home on the other side. More comfortable there than here. Ever since that encounter, I've started collecting stories. People who crossed that stretch and saw the sky a different color. Who saw signs with words that no one else could see. One guy told me that once, the reflection in the mirror showed the truck turning right onto a dirt road, and when he did the same, the road simply wasn't there. Just tall grass. And when he looked back in the mirror, there was nothing there. Not the other truck. Not the reflection. As if I had lost the connection. Or as if the other side had decided it no longer wanted to be seen. I still think about the Orange Road a lot. Sometimes I dream about it. And I always wake up with the impression that I drove for hours in a direction I don't remember choosing. I've found the mirror uncovered twice. Even though I covered it with tape and cloth. Always at 3:03 in the morning. And every time, the image in the glass is different. A still sunset. A road that never ends. And the shape of a truck identical to mine, on the horizon. Waiting. As if it were a door, always half open, waiting for me to have the courage to go through. If you're cruising through the Australian outback, and you notice that your passenger side mirror shows a strange sky, or signs that you don't see in the real world, don't try to clean it up. Don't try to understand it. Just follow it. Don't let it see you. Because if it sees you looking, it might start following you. And the next time you look in a mirror, it might not blink along with you.